madness. This is Sparta!
I still remember vividly the first time I watched 300 a long, long time ago in a small movie theatre right next to a military barracks. And then the film began. Zack Snyder's signature golden hue washed over the screen, and Leonidas stepped out with a stance that looked carved from stone. The entire room fell silent. Every swing of a sword, every battle cry echoed as if I were standing in the middle of the battlefield at Thermopylae. But what I didn't know that night was that to create that feeling of immortal warriors, the cast had paid for it in blood, in tears, and in fears they had never dared to speak aloud. A film boycotted around the world, accused of distorting history, condemned by foreign governments to the point that actors had to hire security because of death threats. A film where the lead actor nearly went blind and believed that the entire crew could have actually died. And even an actress who revealed she had once been threatened by a powerful figure who tried to sabotage her career, rejected by a casting director on the spot, simply because she refused to perform for their amusement. 300 is a legend on screen, but behind the scenes of 300 there is tragedy, bloodshed, and truths Hollywood once tried to bury. And now we're going to dive into the 15 most shocking revelations told by the actors themselves. 15. Gerard Butler reveals. I was genuinely injured, nearly lost my vision, but kept filming anyway. Even though almost 20 years have passed, I still remember the breath-tightening feeling as Leonidas charged into battle. The red-gold light washing over his dust-covered body, the sound of swords striking shields like thunder. Back then, viewers didn't think about CGI or special effects. All they knew was that Butler appeared on screen like a real warrior, so powerful it felt impossible. And because it looked too real, no one imagined what was happening behind the scenes. Not long after, the cast began revealing that Butler didn't just act those scenes, he lived through very real injuries. During one fight sequence, sand and debris blasted directly into his eye, forcing him to stop filming for several days with the risk of temporary vision loss. On top of that, the endless training sessions tore his muscles, bruised his shoulders, and on some days he couldn't even lift the shield far heavier than it appeared on film. But Butler simply said, "I had to be worthy of being a Spartan." Zack Snyder confirmed it. Gerard fought for real. That wasn't acting. Some crew members recalled mornings when he walked onto set with red, aching eyes, yet insisted on finishing the scene. Others said Butler rarely complained he stayed focused on maintaining the warrior spirit he believed Leonidas had to embody. And that was only Butler's story. Because right after that injury-filled behind-the-scenes ordeal came another revelation from a co-star. A story not about weapons or dust, but about the darkest corners of Hollywood. 14. Lena Headey reveals. I refused to play along and my entire career nearly vanished. Do you remember Queen Gorgo standing before the Spartan council? Eyes, unblinking posture, forged from steel, ready to pay any price for what she believed in? Ironically, in real life, Lena Headey once stood before a different kind of council, in closed Hollywood rooms where the weapons weren't swords, but the power of people who could dictate a young actress's future with a single sentence. While working with Harvey Weinstein, Lena recalled that he crossed a professional boundary. When she refused quietly without shouting, simply stepping back to keep her distance, the atmosphere in the room changed instantly. Weinstein went silent for a few seconds, then said a line she described as dropping like a lock snapping shut in front of me. Don't ever embarrass me again. No yelling, no overt threat, but heavy enough that any young actress of that era understood exactly what it meant. After that, the big opportunities that had previously been hinted at suddenly evaporated. Promising scripts never returned. Meetings that had been scheduled simply never happened. Headey said she could feel a very real invisible force pushing her away from major projects. It didn't stop there. During another audition, the casting director suggested a line she would never forget. You should make this audition a little more fun. Lena smiled, declined, and was immediately removed from the shortlist without explanation. Years later, she would describe that entire period as a fog surrounding her career. She was still working, still showing up on screen, but always felt slowed down by forces that had nothing to do with her talent or work ethic. But Lena's turmoil was only one part of the storm surrounding 300. Because once the film hit theatres, the entire cast suddenly faced backlash on a global scale. 13. Zack Snyder reveals 300 was once boycotted worldwide, and they even received real threats. Anyone who watched 300 in the 2000s surely remembers the feeling when the first frames appeared, the deep crimson tones like ancient paintings, the drums pounding as if Sparta itself was shaking, and the warriors emerging as though they had stepped out of a legendary scroll. This wasn't the CGI-saturated era we know today. The magic came from the sense that we were watching an old myth retold with modern breath. Many viewers sat silently until the final minute, as if they had just witnessed a story they'd known since childhood. But few knew that outside the theatre, the reaction was entirely different. Just days after the premiere, 300 faced a massive backlash from the Iranian government, which claimed the film distorted Persian history and insulted their ancestors. Online extremist groups sent threats to the cast, forcing Warner Brothers to increase security during their promotional tour. Zack Snyder explained simply, "We weren't making history, we were making mythology." And Howard Hesseman added, "This is an emotional story, not an ancient lecture." Some crew members recalled learning about the global outrage while they were still in post-production. Interviews were rescheduled, promotional events adjusted to avoid political tension. Some days, the entire team watched the news unsure whether the film's release would be halted or further affected. Ironically, the controversy made thousands of viewers turn to books researching Herodotus and the real Thermopylae battle, something the filmmakers never expected. And just as the crew was handling the international firestorm, another issue arose from within the film itself, a scene that seemed harmless, but was deemed too sensitive by the ratings board. 12. Rodrigo Santoro reveals the Oracle and Xerxes scenes were deemed too sensitive by the MPAA and nearly removed. Do you remember seeing the Oracle for the first time, her body moving in slow, dreamlike motions under swirling smoke, the blue-violet light on her skin, making her appear half mesmerizing, half mythic? Or the moment Xerxes placed his hand on Leonidas, not seductively, but like a ritual filled with unspoken meaning, where power was expressed not through weapons, but through silent touch. These scenes helped define 300. It wasn't just war, but a clash of spirit, willpower and temptation. But few know that both scenes nearly crippled the production. When the first cut was submitted to the MPAA, they ruled that the Oracle's dance and Xerxes' physical contact with Leonidas were too sensitive by the standards of the time. The gazes, the pacing, the closeness all led the MPAA to believe the film was pushing beyond what was allowed for a wide release. Gerard Butler recalled reacting in disbelief. "I didn't think they'd cut it. It wasn't romantic, it was an offer of surrender." Zack Snyder clarified, "It wasn't about seduction, it was about power, about domination." Crew members remembered the review session vividly. They played the Xerxes-Leonidas scene over and over, pausing frame by frame to explain its meaning. They told the MPAA this moment was the film's pivot point, Xerxes trying to break Leonidas, not with armies, but psychologically. After several rounds of discussion, minor adjustments were made, but fortunately, the spirit of the scene, the oppressive silent display of power, remained intact. And the most amusing twist: while the MPAA was debating the Oracle scene, Warner Brothers was busy debating a single line of dialogue, a line that would later become a cultural icon and was nearly removed. 11. I was just yelling for fun. Gerard Butler reveals the iconic "This is Sparta" scene was nearly cut from 300. There are moments in a movie theatre you simply never forget, not because of the effects or the sound, but because something primal rises inside you. For many people, the scene where Leonidas stands before the Persian messenger is one of those moments. The room darkens, the music drops, and the entire audience seems to hold its breath before the eruption. But few know that on the day they filmed that scene, no one was expecting anything special. There was no direction to shout louder, no plan to turn the line into a cultural icon. Gerard Butler simply did what felt right. In that moment, he yelled like a warrior who never retreats, "This is Sparta." And that shout froze the entire set. The cinematographer burst out laughing because the camera literally shook. Some actors forgot their lines because it was so unexpected. Even Zack Snyder admitted he knew something very special had just happened. But when the cut was sent to Warner Brothers, the reaction was the opposite. The studio thought the line was too big, too theatrical, too easy to turn into a joke. One executive even said bluntly, "If you keep this in, audiences will laugh." Snyder refused to compromise. Without that line, there is no 300, it's the soul of Leonidas. Butler could only laugh. When looking back, I had no idea it would become part of pop culture. At the time, I was just yelling for fun. And ironically, the very scene the studio feared would be mocked became one of the most quoted lines of the century. But right after that accidental legend, the cast entered what they later described as the most brutal phase of the entire production. 10. Gerard Butler. Someone ended up in the medical tent every single day. 300 wasn't a movie, it was a battlefield. Back when 300 first aired on cable television, most viewers were mesmerised by those frames that looked like living oil paintings. Few knew that behind every perfectly timed movement on screen, the cast and crew were sacrificing far more than anyone could imagine. Gerard Butler recalled that stepping onto the set each morning felt like entering a zone of non-stop challenge. There was no room for vanity, no luxury of long breaks between takes. Everything was driven by the pounding heartbeat of the actors, the constant calls from the director, the sweat soaking into the training mats, a setting that demanded absolute endurance from everyone involved. Someone needed medical attention every day, Butler said. He wasn't exaggerating, he was simply stating the truth of how fully the cast threw themselves into the process. Some days, a prop weapon would fly a little too close for comfort, forcing the crew to pause for a moment to make sure no one was hurt. On other days, a mistimed step would send someone's ankle absorbing more weight than it should. Strained muscles, mild dislocations, and purple bruises, these became routine parts of the intense regimen designed to make the actors look and move as Spartan as possible. One crew member joked, "We were shooting a film, but sometimes it felt like we were competing in a professional sports tournament." Butler also remembered something Zack Snyder said early in production. "I want every hit to have real weight." That meant minimising stunt doubles, using props that looked and reacted convincingly, and requiring everyone to train for hours before the cameras even rolled. It was this relentless commitment that gave 300 its fierce, unforgettable beauty on screen. But behind those breathtaking scenes were evenings when the cast walked back to their rooms with exhausted bodies but a deep sense of pride. And during one short break in the middle of shooting, Michael Fassbender said something the entire crew still remembers, a single line that captured just how serious, how intense the whole experience truly was. 9. Michael Fassbender. I honestly thought one day the whole crew might die for real. I still remember the feeling back then. Every time Fassbender vaulted over an enemy, I wondered how they managed to shoot it. Not every actor throws themselves into combat like that. Not every film dares to push reality that far. And I had no idea they had nearly paid for it with their safety. In a rare interview, Michael Fassbender said bluntly, "There were days I genuinely thought the whole bunch of us might die on set. No wires, no crash mats, no CGI hiding the danger. Every action beat we saw, the wall runs, the dives into enemy crowds, the slides across real mud was performed entirely without stunt doubles. Zack Snyder wanted the movement to have force weight, real danger, so he almost never used stand-ins. Fassbender remembered the scariest moment sprinting on ground so slick it felt like oil, because the crew kept dumping water into the mud for high-speed shots. He said, "One wrong slip and you'd break a leg." And yet, we just kept doing it over and over. On the final day of shooting, Fassbender delivered a line that made the whole crew laugh and shiver. At the same time, I'm not sure there's anyone left intact to go home. An assistant director recalled having to replace bandages so often it felt like tending to soldiers on a battlefield. But if you think the stunts were the hardest part, you're wrong. Because before they ever stepped onto that battlefield, they had to survive another kind of hell. A place called Jim Jones, where there was sweat suffering and absolutely no mercy. 8. The cast on the hell of Jim Jones. No one leaves that place intact. You remember the first time you saw the bodies of the Spartan warriors in 300, don't you? Not the glossy, polished muscle of modern action films, but the rugged, carved from stone look raw and sharp. Back then, many assumed it came from lighting makeup, maybe even CGI. But the cast later admitted, no effect could create a Spartan body, only sweat and fear could. It all began at Jim Jones, a cold, empty warehouse with no mirrors, no AC, no music, and not a single encouraging word. Mark Twight, a trainer from Military Special Forces, told them on day one, "There are no movie stars here, only survivors and quitters." And the cast from Gerard Butler to Michael Fassbender to dozens of extras had to train together like soldiers. No one was allowed to fall behind. The infamous 300 workout was born here. A routine so brutal it spread worldwide, but few knew the truth. Only one person in the entire production ever finished the original version. Everyone else collapsed before the end. Dominic West has said, "We'd look at each other like we were about to throw up, but no one dared quit. Twight allowed no breaks, no cheating, no water between sets, no praise, only the command again. Some days they trained until their hands shook so badly they couldn't hold a prop knife. Fassbender recalled a session so long the entire group sat in silence for 10 minutes afterward because no one had the strength to stand. But that shared suffering forged a bond. As Dominic West said, after that, hell walking onto set felt easy. But even the Spartan hell wasn't the biggest price Gerard Butler paid, because right after Jim Jones came a blow that forced him out of training for more than a year. 7. Gerard Butler reveals 300 literally destroyed my body. There's something anyone who saw 300 in theatres on opening day still remembers vividly: Gerard Butler's physique. It was raw, heavy and powerful, exactly what you'd expect from a Spartan king preparing for his final battle. Audiences thought he was born to be Leonidas. But looking back, Butler said something that makes that memory far more bitter. 300 destroyed my body literally. That was Butler's own confession years after filming ended. 7 months of non-stop training, 6 hours a day, pushed his body far beyond any normal limit. Torn rotator cuff, chronic tendon inflammation, hip pain so severe he couldn't climb stairs, and days when he couldn't even raise his arm high enough to hold the shield. One crew member described Butler after the long training sessions and brutal battle scenes. He didn't walk like a normal person anymore. He moved like a warrior who had just crawled off a battlefield. Butler recalled, "There were days I woke up and my body refused to cooperate. Every joint hurt. But I had to continue because I knew Leonidas wouldn't stop, and the aftermath lasted longer than the film itself." Butler said that after 300 he couldn't step inside a gym for more than a year. Not because he was lazy, but because he feared his body would collapse if he pushed it even a little more. But even this brutality wasn't the strangest demand Zack Snyder imposed on the cast, because he enforced a rule that left almost no one on set with a shirt to wear. 6. Zack Snyder admits I banned them from wearing shirts on set. You remember the image of the Spartan warriors emerging through golden smoke in 300, don't you? Muscles carved into sharp lines, light sweeping over skin like bronze statues so unreal that many people whispered, "There's no way that's real." Back then, most assumed it was CGI or clever lighting, but the truth, as the cast later revealed, was far simpler and much harsher. Zack Snyder enforced a strict rule from day one. Spartans don't wear shirts. Spartans don't cover their bodies. That meant that no matter what they were filming, battle scenes, running shots, or just waiting for the camera to reset, no one was allowed to wear a shirt, whether the set was freezing or scorching hot. The set looked like a stone gym, muscles everywhere. Snyder wanted the actors constantly aware of their physiques, always flexing, always holding posture like real Spartans. No relaxing. No throw on a jacket during breaks. One extra recalled, "We were shaking from the cold, but Zack just said, 'You're Spartans, push through.'" The temperature on set shifted constantly. Some days the lights were so hot that sweat poured like rain. Other days cold air from the ventilation system made their skin prickle. But Snyder never bent the rule. Their bodies must tell the story before the dialogue begins. And that's what created one of the most iconic visual identities of the 2000s warriors, who truly looked sculpted from stone. But while this striking physicality stole the audience's attention, Lena Headey, the only female lead, faced a completely opposite reaction. A wave of criticism aimed directly at her because of a scene she never wanted. 5. Lena Headey admits, "They blamed me just because Gorgo was forced into a tragic decision." Right after 300 was released, Lena Headey faced harsh backlash from a segment of male viewers over a scene she had no control over. The moment Gorgo is coerced into a morally devastating decision to save Sparta. People wrote letters, comments, even personal attacks accusing her of betraying the image of a strong woman. All Lena could say was, "They confused the actress with the character. I was just doing my job." Gerard Butler defended her immediately. Lena was the strongest person on set. She did not deserve any of that. Zack Snyder also had to clarify the intention behind the scene. It was a tragedy, not weakness. Gorgo did what no one wanted to do in order to save the man she loved. Some crew members recalled that Headey felt immense pressure when she saw the initial backlash. She admitted in a private conversation, "The heartbreaking part was that they thought I supported that act. They forgot I was just telling a story." And the irony. Years later, when Game of Thrones premiered, many of the same people who criticised her now praised her strength as Cersei Lannister. Lena wasn't Gorgo, she wasn't Cersei, she was simply an actress performing too well. While Lena battled psychological pressure, Gerard Butler was fighting something else entirely, his own mind, as he tried to inhabit a man who knew he was marching into his final battle. 4. Gerard Butler reveals, "I had to meditate to disappear from myself and become Leonidas." In interviews after the film's release, Butler revealed that he used meditation to transform into Leonidas. Not the modern relaxing kind, but a method to step out of Gerard to enter the mind of someone fully aware he was heading to his last stand. He said, "I had to feel like I was already dead. Only the mission remained, and this wasn't just something seen on camera." Colleagues said there were days he arrived on set in such an intense state that they remarked, "That isn't Gerard today, that's Leonidas." His co-stars confirmed it. Some mornings he appeared in complete silence with a gaze entirely different from his usual friendly self. Gone was the humorous, open Gerard, replaced by a man carrying the weight of an entire nation on his shoulders. One crew member recalled, "He looked at me once, and I got chills. That wasn't Gerard." Zack Snyder remembered it well. "I wanted Leonidas to have real inner depth. Gerard went far beyond what I expected." And while Butler was sinking into Leonidas's mental world, the other actors had to deal with an entirely different challenge performing on a battlefield. That didn't exist at all. 3. David Wenham reveals, "I was stabbing into thin air. 90% of the battlefield in 300 didn't exist." Wenham admitted that almost the entire battlefield of Thermopylae was created with CGI. No blood, no enemies, no corpses, no warriors clashing around him. He said plainly, "I was stabbing into thin air. Everything was in my imagination. Thrusting a sword at someone who wasn't there. Jumping to dodge a spear. That didn't exist. Retreating from an attack with no actor in front of him." Many people think real combat is the hardest part, but Wenham insists the opposite. Acting against nothing is harder than any real action scene I've ever done. An assistant director remembered that almost every instruction during battle scenes sounded like, "Look to your right, there will be 50 Persians there. Stab the ground, we'll add bodies later. Raise your sword, the light will be placed here." Wenham recalled, "We had to believe in things no one could see. If we didn't believe it, the scene would die instantly." The actors were forced to rely entirely on their imagination, like performing theatre on an empty stage, except every scene demanded life or death intensity. But while the battlefield was fake, the heat, exhaustion and environment they endured were entirely real. And those pushed the entire cast to their limits inside a Sparta no one expected. 2. The cast reveals Sparta was actually just a warehouse heated to 40 degrees. On screen, everything looked mythically beautiful, golden light over warrior bodies, smoke drifting through the air, and each step of Leonidas echoing as if on sacred ground. But few people know that the Spartan Empire the audience saw was no larger than a warehouse in Montreal. 90% of the film was shot inside a sealed studio, unbearably hot, with lights so strong that everyone's skin turned red within minutes. No wind, no natural air, no shade. Gerard Butler recalled days when the temperature reached 46, 104 top armour stuck to their skin, and the smell of sweat made the set feel like a real war camp. And the worst part, they had to perform non-stop battle scenes under lights as hot as a furnace. David Wenham admitted, "We acted while trying not to collapse." Butler even fainted once right after calling the cast to prepare for a scene. Dehydration. Exhaustion. He stood up again and continued filming. The intense lighting melted makeup, constantly requiring touch-ups every 10 minutes. The red capes burned so hot that many actors had to rotate them to avoid minor burns. And because Spartans don't wear shirts, most couldn't shield their bodies from the heat at all. A lighting crew member recalled, "Just standing there made you want to fall over, let alone fighting." And yet, despite the suffocating heat and the historical criticism, the film inspired a surprising reaction. It made thousands of people open history books about Thermopylae. 1. The cast reveals. They yelled at us for getting history wrong, but then they went to read real history. When the film premiered, many historians criticised it fiercely. Not accurate, not a real portrayal of Sparta, not usable as historical material. Some even used harsh words to attack the filmmakers. But what happened next shocked everyone. Thousands of viewers began reading Herodotus, watching documentaries about Thermopylae, and searching ancient sources. One older fan said, "I watched because of the movie, but I read because of the real history." Not everyone appreciated Zack Snyder's mythologized style, but that very choice opened the door for many people to discover the original history. Wenham recalled receiving countless messages from history teachers, students, and older viewers. "I picked up a book because of this movie." Zack Snyder didn't hide his pride. If a film makes people open a book, then even if we're criticised, it still did its job. Another crew member added, "We never intended to teach history. We wanted to inspire curiosity. And apparently, it worked." 300 was not just a movie. It was a place where the cast shed real sweat, endured real injuries, and faced real pressure from the 40-degree set to criticism outside the theatre. Behind every layer of golden light and every frame that looked like a painting were unseen stories, fear, endurance, and the professional pride each member of the cast defended with their own strength. And the strangest part, despite the criticism, misunderstandings, and even boycotts, 300 still inspired thousands to revisit the true history of Thermopylae, which behind-the-scenes revelation surprised you the most? Tell us in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell because the next videos will be even more incredible.